All right. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining this session. My name is Ravik Shirsagar, and today we would be talking about some basics around Agile and Scrum. So title of this webinar is Agile and Scrum, all you need to know. So the whole idea is behind this webinar is basically you get an understanding about what is Agile, what is Scrum. And I'm sure that most of you who have joined this session, right, may have some sort of an interest in either of these topics or certain courses or certifications associated with this. So my honest attempt would be to give you some basic insights about these two topics. So having said that, now let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Ravik Shirsagar. I have been in this field, lean, agile, digital transformation, design thinking, product management for over 20 years now. And I have been training, coaching, and consulting in this domain since last 9 years now, full time. So that's what my quick introduction is. As far as my professional credentials are concerned, right, I hold PSPO, I hold CSM, I hold PSM. I'm a certified agile coach. I'm a Kanban practitioner. I'm a safe program consultant. I also hold this one of very unique certification, that is being a PMO consultant. And from PMI, I hold 3 certifications: PGMP, PMP, and PMI-ACP. All right, so that's a brief about me, and I work more or less as sort of an practice expert in lean agile domain along with InfosecTrain, right? So having that quick introduction, let me quickly go to the topic now. Now, what we are going to cover in this webinar. So idea is very simple. Around 45 odd minutes, we are going to have some conversation, and rest 45 minutes would be sort of an open house, right, where we can have an Q&A session. So this is how I have thought about how we can progress in this webinar. So I thought, let's answer 4 basic questions which are always there in the mind of people. One is, what is agile? Let's briefly talk about that. Second important question that definitely needs attention, and this comes from all the corners, is why agile makes sense in today's context. If it is getting that much acceptance, it is getting embraced across the corner of the organization, across the industry, why it is making sense. Then we will discuss what is Scrum, and is Agile and Scrum same, or is Agile and Scrum different? If yes, what are the difference? If no, why they are two different terminologies. That we will discuss in brief. And then eventually I will give you some idea about some of the certifications associated with Agile and Scrum, specifically PMI-ACP and PSM certification. So the long forms also I have written here. So PMI-ACP is Agile Certified Practitioner. PMI is Project Management Institute. It's a accreditation body which administers this certification. And PSM is Professional Scrum Master, which is again administered by scrum.org. So these are two important certifications. So with that note, let's get going. And if we have to put this into perspective, right, then we need to understand some key aspects around Agile. And these aspects are basically, there is no single definition of Agile, which is a good part about Agile, and it is also the downside of the Agile. However, there are certain perspectives around Agile. So having an innate understanding of these perspectives and embracing this perspective is what agility means in true sense. So what I'm just gonna do here is sharing with you those perspectives, right? What agile means, what those perspectives are, and how you can understand, appreciate, and embrace those perspectives, right? So this is what I'm going to do. Let's talk about it. Now, this is a very famous slide. You might have seen somewhere if you have taken a course related to Agile, or if you have gone through some sort of an educational intervention, right? This slide comes up. So perhaps what you may not know, who has created this slide. So this slide is created by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Emmett Sitkey, who is a very famous name in Agile fraternity. And this is the way he describes Agile. So what he says is basically, Agile is a mindset. It's a thought process, how you perceive that. It is described by 4 values and defined by 12 principles, and it is manifested through unlimited number of practices. So this is what basically the perspective around Agile is. Now, if this part is clear to you, right, then what would make sense is to understand the granular details of each of these. This is coming from the gentleman, Dr. Ahmed Sidki, right? So he was saying that it's a mindset. It's described by 4 values, principles, and manifested through unlimited number of practices. So the point I was trying to drive here is that if you want to say that we are true agilists, we need to understand what those values are, what those principles are, and what those unlimited number of practices available at our disposal, and then how do we use them, right? Now I was coming back, to the earlier conversation that one of the few colleagues said that, what are the perspectives around Agile? So one perspective was it's a development methodology. Of course, yes, it's one of the perspective around Agile, and you would like to know this, that all the methodologies or framework which are part and parcel of Agile are basically based on a single principle, that is iterative and incremental way of development. This is number one. Second important perspective around Agile is basically some sort of an behavioral modeling. That is, to be effective in today's work context, which is driven by change, transformation, right? And constantly moving from one way of working to another way of working, we need to have some sort of an behavioral capability. So what is that? What that behavioral modeling is required, which is basically manifested by these values and principles, right? Another important tenet or facet around Agile is basically a collaborative way of working. The idea is very simple. The kind of problems we used to manage a decade ago or even more than that, right, were not that complex, right? But today's problems are very complex, and the kind of problem solving methodologies we used to use then, they may not be relevant today. So we need some sort of an collaboration which brings in lot of ideas together, and that creativity drives innovation and problem solving. Now that's the idea behind collaboration. And one of another perspective around Agile is about self-organization. That is, you are given a goal, but how that goal is achieved, right? Nobody's gonna use a control and command approach. It is left to the team. It is left to the people who are solving that a problem with a basic assumption that the people have that innate creativity, right? And using that creativity, they are able to solve that problem, right? So these are some of the perspectives around Agile. So if you want to say that I'm a true agilist in a way, what matters is you understand all these perspectives. Now, having said that, what Agile is, right? It's a broader perspective. Then the second obvious question that comes to us is basically what is Scrum? Now, Scrum is one of the practice or a methodology or a framework, whatever you choose to call it. If you look at, the originators of Scrum, they call it as framework, that is built on principles of iterative and incremental way of development. And on top of it, Scrum has something about values, right? Some principles, some rules, some artifacts, right? And certain roles, which drives a journey of an initiative from start to finish. But the core understanding around Scrum is application of iterative and incremental way of development. It's very lightweight, and it's yet very powerful, and perhaps that is the reason why it is getting so much of a popularity and prominence, right, in especially IT development sector. And of course, while this success is really noteworthy, right, it may not be unfair to say that these concepts can be applied to several aspects of business other than development. Or I will go a step further and will say that, these concepts and these philosophies can be applied to several industries, right? So that's the idea behind Scrum. Okay, so this word basically has originated through research that was published in around 80s. Takuchi and Nanoka were the two Japanese researchers who talked about the new principles of product development. And in that new principles of product development, one of the classic examples these two Japanese researchers quoted were, we got to be playing like rugby players, and any event that triggers in a rugby with a goal, that the ball, right, it should be taken to a goal post. So the team that takes the ball to the goal post, that wins. And every time this event happens, this iteration happens, right, the kind of coordination that is seen there among the team is unique every time. So that concept is of Scrum, right, in the context of rugby. So while several people got excited and enlightened through these concepts written by Takuchi and Nanoka, the developers of Scrum, the originators of Scrum, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber, were equally excited by this concept, and that founded the name Scrum and the underlying principles and practices around it. And since then, it has created an impact, and it will continue to create impact for a greater period of time, right? So that is Scrum in a nutshell. All right. So now you have understood that it is basically a framework which is based on iterative and incremental way of development. All right. So let's move forward, right? That I have given you an understanding. So this is a basic framework of Scrum. While it may not be sufficient time available with us, right, to go through every aspect of the Scrum, right? But I will give you some sort of an overview. Beginning with, if you see here, it is very simple, right? That's the core of it. So it talks about, three roles, and those three roles are product owner, Scrum master, and development team. An underlying idea behind Scrum is basically anything and everything that needs to be done, right, to drive the journey of an initiative from start to finish. That work is distributed around these three roles, right? All activities, whether it is administrative or management related work, or whether it is associated with the product development work, everything and anything is distributed within these three roles, right? So that's the about these three roles, and they drive the entire journey. Second important component of Scrum is basically the events, and in my opinion, that is basically the heartbeat of Scrum. If you do not get this right, then perhaps you won't be able to understand or appreciate the very rhythm of Scrum. And then those events are the sprint itself, and by definition, sprint is a time box. It's an iteration, a fixed period, be it 1 week, 2 week, or 4 week, and anything and everything happens within that time box, right? Then the another one is sprint planning. That is a specific time provided to the Scrum team, right, to identify what they need to do within that time box. The third activity is basically, sorry, the event is the daily Scrum, which is another opportunity for the team to collaborate on a daily basis, right? And see how things are working. Do a constant sanity check on a day-to-day basis. And finally, two important events, that is sprint review and retrospective. So the sprint review is a mechanism to review the work done, to make acceptance and rejection decisions, and followed by a sprint retrospective, where the focus is more on how do we become better, how do we review our process and then people part, and then where and find out improvement opportunities. So through this continuous journey, right, the team start generating the increments, right? So that's the idea. And three important the artifacts, those are described in Scrum, is product backlog, which is nothing but sum total of the features and functionalities, the enhancements, the bug fixing that needs to be done, right? Which eventually gets translated in a sprint backlog through a sprint planning meeting. That is agreed upon work to be done for that particular sprint or iteration. And once this work is done, what you get is basically an increment, which is nothing but a potentially shippable or consumable set of features and functionalities, which makes sense for the consumers, right? That is adding value to the customer, the consumer or the customer. Now that's a very simple framework. While I have oversimplified this conceptual understanding of Scrum, but there are a lot of details those needs to be understood in order to be an effective Scrum practitioner. And I'm using that word Scrum practitioner. And the reason I typically use this word is to stay role agnostic, right? Not viewing from the lenses of a Scrum master, or not viewing from the lenses of a product owner, or a development team, right? Let's call us as a Scrum practitioner, and we want to understand every single role in the organization need to understand this philosophy, right? So that's the idea. If we again stumbled upon, in either of the session that I'm gonna cover, or I'm continue to cover such sessions for the larger audience, we will discuss those details. But the scope of this particular webinar is not to take a deep dive. So again, I will restrict my conversation at this point, right? And then we will find more opportunities to discuss on that. But that's what Scrum is. So in principle, if we have to look at, what is the difference between this Scrum and Agile, is basically Agile is a bigger concept, right? Which talks about the broader principles and practices within this domain. And Scrum is one of the methodology thought process within Agile, which has a specific focus. Now, having said that, the next slide, right, which I wanted to show you is basically the differences between these two certifications, where we started with the PMI-ACP and PSM, right? So to get to this point, it was essential for me to set up the context right. Now you have understood the difference between Agile and Scrum. So there are two certifications around this. PMI-ACP, that is Project Management Institute Agile Certified Practitioner, and PSM is basically Professional Scrum Master, which is offered by scrum.org. In its own sense, both are unique certification and both offer a unique value. Now, what is that? It is something I'm going to explain you in next few minutes. All right. So what is PMI-ACP? So here, if you see, the focus is on Agile values and principles, and it provides an holistic view of the Agile product development lifecycle. And this is methodology agnostic certification for Agile practitioners. So what does this mean? Is basically, it is not restricted to a particular thought process, right? It provides an end-to-end understanding about, what Agilist needs to know, what principal practices they needs to know, right? So it has a broader coverage. But on contrary, PSM is focused on Scrum principle, processes, and practices, because it is to gain more understanding, a deeper level of understanding and expertise in Scrum, right? So this is a role-specific certification, specifically how to assume the role of a Scrum Master in an effective way. That's where the focus is, right? So this is a fundamental difference between ACP and PSM. And hope you understood that each one of them has a unique value proposition. All right. Now, who should take this PSM certification? In case if you are interested, to know more about it, or if you have that question in mind, is it meaningful for me to take this certification? Then the answer is, this certification is for everyone who is part of the product delivery team, irrespective of your designation. Because this certification or this course is structured in such a way that you just cannot ignore it, in a way that no matter which role you assume, this foundational concept needs to be very well ingrained in your mindset. Okay. So in a way, if you are somebody who is a practicing Scrum Master, you would be able to gain a scholastic understanding of the Scrum. While it is possible that you might have read certain literature, certain videos, or you might have gained some understanding through some informal courses, but trust me, if you go through this formal understanding, right, the course that is proposed by Scrum or right, you will see the differentiator, and perhaps it might give you several such insights which you have not been aware of before the course, right? Let's say if you're a product owner, you can learn how to collaborate with Scrum Master, because Scrum is built on collaboration. So appreciating the role of the Scrum Master, what is the value Scrum Master is going to bring to the table, that perspective is very important. And without having an understanding of your partner, your ally, how you will be able to collaborate with them. So that perspective is built into this course. If you are someone from a development team, You can learn the Scrum process and improve product delivery flow, because that's the expectation from every single role of the development team, that they should be able to work seamlessly within this framework. So having a deep understanding of that framework becomes a prerequisite. That is something you are going to get right through this course. And if you are any stakeholder who has a vested interest in product delivery, software product delivery, then you will start appreciating the role of Scrum Master, or even the framework of the Scrum, right? So if you are somebody who is embarking on a journey of Scrum, trying to get a holistic understanding of Scrum, irrespective of your experience level, then the recommendation is that's PSM. Start from it, right? So this is about PSM. Now, having said that, let's talk about the PSM course structure, how it is structured, right? So this is based on a competency map derived by Scrum.org. So this is not kind of a course, right, which does not have standard. This course has standards, and it ensures that these standards are appropriately followed. And this is what something we call it as a competency map, right? So here I have just given a brief about the competency map that is covered in this course, right? So at least at InfosecTrain, we will make an conscious effort that whatever we deliver, right, there is a measurement that the skills and skills around this competency map are appropriately covered through activities, through role plays, or whatever learning methodology we use. So first is understanding and applying the Scrum framework. So the focus is on understanding the concept of empiricism. What does it mean? What are the Scrum values? What are the roles in the Scrum team? What are the event artifacts, and what does done mean? Right? Basic practices. The second focus of PSM one course is based on taking a deep dive in what does self-management means? What does self-organization means? Right? There is a deep focus on the concept of facilitation, not only as a concept, it is about how you do that. Leadership, and how a Scrum Master can become a coach and a mentor. What are the practical considerations to be factored in there? Another competency area is managing product with agility. That is, how to forecast and how to do release planning, how to ensure that the product value is understood and delivered, and then how to manage product backlog. And lastly, developing and delivering products professionally. So here you will get an understanding about the emergent software development practices, which are continuously emerging, right? Some aspects around the technical skills and continuous quality or continuous improvement. So how to gain these skills? It is the very focus or the very fabric of the PSM course, right? From the perspective of Scrum, or in other words, you can say that if you are a Scrum Master, right, through earning these competencies and skills, how you can become a better practitioner and improve the product delivery. So that's the idea behind the PSM course. And if you have to look at the role of the Scrum Master, again I will not get into the details of this, right? This recording would be made available, and you can always look at this slide in the recording. But what idea, central idea is basically how a mindset of being a servant leader is cultivated or embraced by Scrum Master. That is the fundamental focus of PS. So how Scrum Master can be a servant leader of the team, be a servant leader of product owner, and be a servant leader of the organization, and through his or her role, what sort of difference he or she can bring in, right? That's the whole idea behind PS. So if that sounds exciting for you, that that is something you need to learn, you need to understand, then PSM is something good for you, right? As far as exam details are concerned, many this question typically comes to me, right? Let us know about how to earn this certification, right? Then it is and 80 questions are there, which are multiple choice, true or false. Duration is 60 minutes, and passing percent is 85%, right? We will discuss more about it in some time. Now, on the contrary, right, what is PMI-ACP certification, right? That PMI-ACP certification is basically for everyone who want to understand various frameworks under Agile. Now, it has a broader context. It is just not, confined to Scrum. It talks about several other practices. So no matter what role you are currently assuming, right, it will bolster your skills. It will add to your skill repertoire, right? You can learn how does your role fit in agile product development life cycle, because it covers things beyond Scrum, beyond those practices. It covers the entire product life cycle. On top of it, it covers a battery of tools, right, which are very diverse, coming from several domains and thought processes, right, which are very useful. And you will get a deeper understanding of various flavors of agile, and it will give you a thought process above and over Scrum, right? So if you're looking for a deep dive in agile, then perhaps PMI-ACP is for you. All right, so think about it. So I hope this will help you to make a choice between what makes sense for you. In certain cases, you may think that, both things make sense for me, because ACP is giving me a broader perspective and Scrum is giving me a specialist perspective. So that choice you have to make. As far as course curriculum is concerned, meaning what are the broad competency areas are covered in PMI-ACP are like this. So it gives you a broad coverage around agile principles and mindset. It gives you a broad coverage on what we call it as the value driven delivery. What does it mean? How to keep that mindset? It gives you a broader understanding about how to gain stakeholder engagement. And this continuous improvement can be thought on three aspects: the product, processes, and people. So this is agnostic to a methodology. It talks about the principles, the concepts, the tools, right, that can be applied, so that you gain these competencies. And these competencies are definitely very much required to be successful and effective in today's context. Of course, again, this is just a teaser to give you an understanding about it, right? This webinar again is not focusing on getting into the deep dive of it. And as I said, we will keep finding opportunities. We will keep the duration is 180 minutes, right? That is the time you have to complete the assessment. That's the time box. And unfortunately, what is the passing score, right? That is not published by PMI, right? That is something you need to know as a speculation, as a practitioner in this field, right? The speculation is that it is 65%. Of course, nobody can validate that, but that's how the system is, right? Now that has given you a greater understanding about the differences between PMI-ACP and Scrum. So bottom line, if you are someone who is looking at a broader perspective around Agile, right, it's PMI-ACP. If you are someone who want to get a deeper understanding around Scrum with a specific focus on how to assume the role of a Scrum Master, then the obvious choice is PSM, right? And here on this slide, I have just shown a summary of the steps, right, that you can or you should be taking in order to earn your PMI-ACP certification. So this is very simple one. Number one is apply, right? Then PMI reviews your application to check that you are eligible. Then you go for payment, that they make the payment. In between, your application may get audited, that is to confirm that the information you have provided, it is correct and accurate. Once you make the payment, right, you can schedule your examination, and the current examination partner is Pearson. And once you pass, you need to maintain your certification, because the validity is for 3 years, right? So this is the simple step of PMI-ACP certification. It is straightforward, right? If you make a decision that you want to go through this certification, you will get all the help you need from administrative point of view, right from creating your application packet until submission, that, and even after, during throughout your certification preparation journey. Now coming back, to the important part. Of course, the goal of this webinar is basically that triggers some kind of an excitement within your mind. And in case if you feel that, this is a journey that is worth traveling, you would like to either consider a PSM certification or ACP certification, right? Do send us an email on sales@infosectrain.com. It's very simple, right? and we would be more than happy to answer any questions you may have around this, right? So that's where basically, I would conclude in a way around what does it means to around PMI, ACP, and PSM certification. Lastly, if you are interested, right, to know more about the batches, so the upcoming batch for PMI-ACP is starting from 4th of December, and the new batch of the Professional Scrum Master, the PSM, right, it is starting from 8th of June. So enrollments are open. If you are interested, do drop a query, and I would be more than happy to answer your questions while the front-ending team would be working closely with you. But if you have any question, comment that needs specific attention, feel free to ask our team to have a connect with me, and I would be more than happy to answer and address those questions you may have in mind, right? So this is where, I will rest my case as far as the conversation around PSM and PMI ACP is concerned. And now let me open the floor for any questions that you may have around, this PMI ACP and PSM certification, right? So